Billionaire Michael Saylor just made a bombshell Bitcoin prediction this week. And we're going to be talking about that $21 million prediction here in a moment. But let's not forget, over the past 48 hours, Bitcoin has been crashing while the M2 money supply, the yellow line on that chart, has been absolutely exploding. And we can see that whales, the green lines on this chart, have also been aggressively accumulating Bitcoin. So what is happening? Why is Bitcoin crashing? Does Michael Saylor know something that we don't? Let's listen to this brand new prediction. Then we're going to try to break everything down.
Of all that information, I'm going to now share my Bitcoin prophecy. I think we're going to be $21 million in 21 years. It's a very special time in the network, maybe the one time in the history of the network where you look out 21 years and you see 21 million. Specifically, I expect 21 million coins at a $21 million price in 21 years, and people ask, how's the network going to grow? It's going to be growing at 21% in 21 years. The volatility is going to be 21. This is all, the only number you need to remember is the number 21. And what does that look like? Well,
what does that look like? Of course, I'm going to be having a little bit of a look and explaining what I think this looks like. But first, I want to kind of explain what's changed with Michael Saylor's Bitcoin predictions. Most people would be familiar with his 21-year forecast that he came out with in 2024. He said his base case for Bitcoin was $13 million. Now, his base case looks as if it's gone up to $21 million. Doesn't sound like a big difference. 13 million, 21 million, I get it. Big numbers, but that's a big difference. That's a 30 to 40% change. Now, what I think is fascinating is the CAGRs that Michael broke down. So this here is actually an Excel spreadsheet that I whipped up looking at Michael Saylor's bear case, base case, and bull case for Bitcoin over the next 21 years. Now, I've crunched all of the numbers and I've showed you guys the differences between these different compounded annual growth rates. And you can see you get some wildly different numbers. If Bitcoin compounds at 36% a year over the next 21 years, you're looking at a $32 million Bitcoin. But if Bitcoin compounds at 22% per year, not a big difference from 36%, you see a $3 million Bitcoin. So what I think is very interesting is just how much variation we're going to see in the price of Bitcoin based upon what compounded annual growth rate we are going to see moving forward into the future. But again, I think Michael makes some really good points that I want to break down. Before I break out the maths, I want to go back to Michael's presentation that he gave literally 48 hours ago, if my clock serves me correctly, at BTC Prague. Again, I was at this conference, and I will tell you, that stadium was absolutely packed. There was 10,000 Bitcoiners in there, and if I was a betting man, I'm not a betting man, but if I were, I reckon 5,000 to 10,000 people were trying to cram into the one room to listen to Michael.
28.5% from here. Not that.
So that's what Michael thinks we're going to see in the future, 28.5%. Let's play this entire little snippet because it's very important to be taking notes and listening to what Michael says, especially when we start crunching the numbers here in a moment.
And what does that look like? Well, that looks like 28.5% from here. Not that different, slightly less than 29% ARR. But the path to 21 million, it's not going to be simple. It's going to be volatile. And so you're going to see a volatility, and it's going to damp over time, but you got to be prepared for the volatility, for the surges and the drawdowns, the good days, the bad days. This is Bitcoin's annualized return looking back a decade, looking forward 2 decades. And you can see that The network was growing faster when it's small. That's totally rational. It's now in the mid-50s. What do I expect? I expect it will continue to grow exponentially, but as it approaches hundreds of trillions of dollars, it will decelerate to the point where it's growing about 21% a year.
21% a year. I'm pretty bullish on that. I'm going to take that every day of the week. 21% per year. It's a lot more than what you're going to get investing into the traditional stock markets. I mean, God forbid, imagine you buy a government bond. You're getting 2% yields when the inflation rate's probably 5 to 10%. That is what investing in government bonds has looked like over the past decades. And obviously, we know that the stock markets, they return somewhere around 5 to 7% on average for the past 100 years. And Michael thinks that under any circumstance, even the worst circumstances, Bitcoin's going to be growing at 21% every single year. Okay, now that's, again, it's not a big number. I, again, have made the case multiple times on this channel for why we need to be thinking bigger and really entertaining some thoughts about what might happen in Bitcoin's future. Because I love this little Excel spreadsheet, because on the right-hand side, I've added the historical compounded annual growth rate for Bitcoin on this table. I've popped it next to Michael's bear base and bull case. And as we can see, Bitcoin's historical compounded annual growth rate is 195%. That's nearly 200%. That implies Bitcoin triples every year on average. And again, I think these are the numbers that I don't expect to continue forever, but I do think that we're going to see a few more years with a compounded annual growth rate of 195%. Again, I've commonly said that the markets will punish the consensus view. And I think the consensus view is, Bitcoin's getting bigger and bigger. It's becoming less and less volatile. Its returns and its CAGR, it's going to decrease systematically year after year after year. I think that's the consensus view. And I think that consensus view is going to get wrecked. But before I talk about why I think it's going to get wrecked, let's talk about the speech. Why has Michael increased his Bitcoin price prediction for $21 million by the year 2046? We've broken down some numbers. We've talked a little bit about CAGRs. We're going to talk a little bit more about CAGRs in a moment. But why has Michael increased his Bitcoin price prediction? Well, in that keynote speech, he specifically mentioned that all of the things that have happened over the past 12 months in the realm of politics and governments and nation states adopting Bitcoin has completely changed the game. Okay, this is very, very important to be aware of, because Michael's, again, he's pointing to all of the things that we talk about all the time on the channel. Corporate adoption of Bitcoin, nation state adoption of Bitcoin. All of these things have absolutely changed Bitcoin. Again, I think we're in a completely different realm when it comes to Bitcoin supply and demand economics. And I just think a lot of people are going to be very, very surprised about what happens in the future. Michael directly says, "This is an extraordinary development. We didn't anticipate the White House embracing Bitcoin. This has brought a sea change in politics." And again, I think this sea change is going to help explain why Bitcoin's CAGR might surprise people on the upside. So what chart have I got up on screen right now? This is one of my favorite animations. It's made by Mikic from Twitter, and it's showing Bitcoin's price in the white, but it's showing its CAGR. So as you can see in the first 5 years of Bitcoin, its CAGR was like 900%. Again, 4 years of data. I always encourage you guys to zoom out. But I think this chart is a really interesting one to just keep an eye on. We're going to be watching this as it evolves. I personally just think that a 21% CAGR for the next 21 years, I think it's more on the conservative side. Again, that's just an opinion. That's it. Again, you can... I'm disagreeing with a man with a $10 billion net worth here, so take my opinion with a grain of salt. But I just genuinely think the CAGR for Bitcoin is probably going to be a little bit higher than 21% over the next 21 years. As we can see, Bitcoin's CAGR over the past 5 years, it's been, what is it over the past 5 years? Let me pause right there. We got a 12-year CAGR of 119%, 10-year CAGR in the yellow, 63.8%, and an 8-year CAGR of 84.9%. Again, I think that's pretty bullish. 8-year CAGR, 85%. That's kind of what I expect moving forward in the future. We're going to see some really interesting things evolve in the future. But before we get into discussing all of those, I want to also have a look at one of the charts that I think explains why I expect that CAGR to be much bigger than most people think. Most people are expecting 20%, but that's because they just think Bitcoin's going to be worth $100 trillion. I think if we have a look at all of the different buckets of money around the world, whether it's gold, the Fed's balance sheet, Fortune 500, the stock markets, I think a much higher percentage of all of this money around the world is going to be flowing into Bitcoin. Have a look at the global real estate market, for example. This is absolutely huge, $300 trillion. And I just think a large majority of that is going to be completely demonetized, and it's going to be looking for a new home. Okay, again, I did an interview recently with Peter Dunworth from British Hodl. Peter, who's managed money for decades, openly said his clients are slowly but surely selling real estate to buy Bitcoin, and they're doing it hand over fist. Okay, this is very, very important just to be aware of. I think this sea change has already happened, and this is why we're beginning to see even the most bullish Bitcoin advocates in the entire world openly saying, yeah, you know what, maybe, just maybe, Bitcoin's total addressable market cap is even bigger than anyone might imagine. This here's a really interesting graphic. This actually puts some more numbers behind Michael Saylor's predictions. I really like it because in the orange, you can kind of see that we have a $280 trillion Bitcoin market cap in 21 years. But what I think is really insightful about this chart is it accounts for the fact that a lot more money is going to be printed. Global wealth is also hopefully going to increase. Maybe it won't if our bureaucrats and communists in government backbenches all around the world continue employing very collectivist policies. That is obviously not good for growing wealth. If anything, it actively destroys wealth. But again, let's hope global wealth increases over the next 21 years. Let's not hope, but let's assume that the money printers remain on, because they probably will stay on. This just means what we're going to see is this chart with global wealth, it's going to increase. Today, we've got around 1 quadrillion, so $900 trillion of wealth in the world. Michael's projecting this is going to 4x, so about 4,000 trillion by 2045. And again, I still think these projections are incredibly conservative, because look at how small the Bitcoin bucket is. Look at that little orange square in the top left-hand side of that chart. $280 trillion. I just personally think Bitcoin's going to be much bigger than that. I think Bitcoin's going to be bigger than equities. Equities in the bottom left here, big bright blue, $850 trillion in size. Again, before we left the gold standard, money stored in gold was bigger than equities. People kept more money in money, makes sense, doesn't it, than the equity market. I forget the exact figures, but the market cap of gold was bigger than the market cap of equities at the end of the 1980s, after that very historic inflationary decade. And again, I just think this is going to repeat. I think we're going to see Bitcoin continue to grow, continue to surprise people. And I think the narrative is slowly but surely shifting. The narrative we're seeing today is a narrative that is completely different to what we saw even what 3 years ago. Everybody was talking about trading Bitcoin. Now, I want to show you what the narrative is today by playing a short little clip of the sitting president of America. Let's see if I've got audio here. All right. So you guys get the idea, whether you got audio or not in that clip. Never sell your Bitcoin. That is the common narrative that we see in the Bitcoin space today. We got the sitting president of America saying, never sell your Bitcoin. Again, I think a lot of people, they might get that little trigger finger a little bit too happy in the bull run when we see 600,000, 700,000, 800,000 Bitcoin. I'm asked all the time by people, what do I do in that world? I encourage you guys, listen to Donald Trump, the sitting president of America. I very rarely endorse the opinion of politicians, especially the orange man. But what I will say is that I don't think you should ever sell your Bitcoin, okay? Selling your Bitcoin, it's a really bad idea. I'm always asked for solutions. What do I do with my Bitcoin if I'm not supposed to sell it, Luke? I always tell you guys, borrow against your Bitcoin, but be very careful with what you use or who you use to borrow against your Bitcoin. Do not use BlockFi. Do not use Celsius. Do not use FTX. Again, I was one of the few crazy Bitcoiners in 2022 saying, do not use these platforms. You don't know where the yield is coming from. That means you are the yield. But in 2025, things are a little bit more safer. That's why I encourage you guys to check out what FIREFISH is doing. They are a Bitcoin peer-to-peer lending platform. Again, they don't take custody of your Bitcoin, and we use multi-signature vaults for people to actually use when they're borrowing against their Bitcoin. Again, if you guys haven't checked out FIREFISH, I highly encourage you guys check out the platform. They have 1,600, that's right, 1,600 Bitcoin of loans processed on the platform. I actually met the guys in Prague this week. I can confirm they are just as cool as their product. They're a great team of guys. And again, I always encourage you guys, check out FIREFISH. They've got the stamp of approval from many in the Bitcoin space. If you want to learn more about them, their co-founder, Igor, was recently on the Stefan Levera podcast. And again, if you guys do want to check out FIREFISH and never sell your Bitcoin, you can use a promo code Luke to get 30% off your first transaction over on FIREFISH. So I highly recommend you do that. And I highly recommend everybody, to Steve's comment in the chat, never sell your Bitcoin. Because again, I do think these numbers and these projections, $21 million in 21 years, it's great. It's bullish. Okay, don't get me wrong. I understand all of that. But I think the real numbers I want to personally take a peep at is that number I've got there highlighted in yellow. If Bitcoin just repeats its 195% CAGR that it has done for 16 years, for just another 5 years, I think all of a sudden the numbers that I'm looking at is $66,233,000 Bitcoin by 2031. Again, I know that's crazy. I understand it. People's minds struggle to conceptualize exponential change, but that is simply where Bitcoin is going. If it just repeats what it's done over the past, 16 years. Again, I'm only extrapolating this data out another 5 years. I don't think it's completely absurd, but I do think it's more correct, directionally correct than the power law and these other models that I believe have faulty data. So again, this is why I always encourage you guys, protect your Bitcoin, back up your Bitcoin. I think the best way to back up your Bitcoin is to stamp your Bitcoin 12 or 24 words into titanium. That's why I always encourage you guys to check out the incredible product that Stamp Seeds created. They've created these titanium plates that, as you can see, they should be your one-stop shop for your Bitcoin 12 or 24 words. Please, for the love of God, do not write down your Bitcoin backup words on something like this. This is paper. This breaks easily. This thing, you can hear it. It's flimsy. It's not going to survive fire. Please rip that thing up, put it in the trash. I hope I didn't just actually rip up one of my laundry lists here at the hotel. But you should not be using paper for your Bitcoin 12 or 24 words. use titanium. Again, I always encourage you guys, check out StampSeed. I've been partnered up with these guys for a year. I use them personally. I only encourage you guys to check out products I use personally. I, again, met half of the team of StampSeed at Prague this week. And again, you guys can get 15% off anything you want to buy from StampSeed with that promo code Luke15. That'll also be linked down below in the description alongside FIREFISH and everything you need to know about those guys. Now, a couple of comments here in the chat I want to address before we kind of round out this little bullish Michael Saylor rip that I've put together for you guys today. We've got some comments. Please, if you guys are staking, just be incredibly careful. Be incredibly careful. Staking is doesn't get the Luke tick of approval. Let's just say that. Steve, I'm sorry, but there will be no next Bitcoin. We've been waiting 16 years for the next revolutionary Bitcoin to come along and displace it. We haven't seen it. And I think every single day that goes by post the creation of post the creation of Bitcoin in 2008, every day that goes past, I think it makes it exponentially more difficult that another cryptocurrency will be created to take away the network effects that Bitcoin has. Again, that's the big kicker here. If you look at the 100,000-year history of technology and the 7,000-year history of money, you have to be 1,000 times better than the incumbent to disrupt its monopoly. Okay, so again, Bitcoin's monopoly is growing by the day. I think the probability of something coming along and displacing it, it's shrinking by the day, exponentially. Something that's not shrinking by the day, oh, I could say something really inappropriate there. Something that's not shrinking by the day is the number of Bitcoin held by whales. Have a look at this chart. We can see here, the green indicates that whales are aggressively buying Bitcoin at some of the most rapid rates that we've seen since Bitcoin rallied from $60,000 to $108,000 in 2 months. I know some Bitcoiners aren't the biggest fans of whale watching, but I like to show you guys the data because, again, I don't trade off this data, but I do think it's interesting. And again, this is a 1-year chart here, not cherry-picked. It's actually nearly a 2-year chart. You can see pretty clearly the red lines up with the tops and the big spurts of green, the big buying spurts, they typically line up with pretty big rallies. So that's all I'm going to say. I think that's an interesting chart. I know a lot of people have been looking at this chart and they're thinking, hang on a minute, Bitcoin's starting to crash while the yellow line is exploding higher. What's happened? Is Bitcoin broken? I don't think Bitcoin's broken. I think Bitcoin is going to benefit greatly from this money printing bonanza that we're about to head into. And even Bitcoin's most bullish of bulls has kind of come to that realization himself by increasing the 2024 forecast for Bitcoin that he made, which was obviously a $13 million base case by 2045. He now thinks we're going to be a little bit closer to $21 million by 2046. Look at, oh my Lord. I wonder if that's girlfriend Jocelyn in the chat. Look out. This is trouble. Michael said to never sell, just lend and buy more. Sound advice. Very sound advice. Now, speaking of sound advice, I always encourage you guys, don't listen to what I say online. None of this is financial advice. What I will say is I think you should listen to people who have managed money for decades. Okay? That's why I always like to interview Peter Dunworth and bring him onto the channel for you guys. I actually recently interviewed some more money managers this week in Prague at the BTC conference. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you're notified for when those interviews drop. So again, hit the subscribe button down below if you want to see what I've got cooking. And again, if you want to listen to those recent interviews that I did with Peter Dunworth, I'm going to put 2 links up on screen somewhere around there. And that's going to take you to recent interviews I've done with Peter. So check those out if you want to check them out. And with all that said, thank you so much to the 512 of you guys tuning in live between Twitter and YouTube. I'll see you all in the next one.